Have you ever stopped and wondered what percentage of the things you worry about actually happen? Researchers at the University of Cincinnati tracked people struggling with anxiety and found something staggering. 85% of what they feared never materialized. And of the 15% that did, 79% of the time, the outcome was better than they expected. Think about that. It means that statistically speaking, 97% of the time, your mind is flat out lying to you. You aren't experiencing reality. You're experiencing what we call a reality distortion field, generated by your own brain, a terrifying, convincing simulation of what might happen, masquerading as what is happening. Anxiety isn't the problem. It's the symptom. The real problem is that you believe the lies. In this video, we're not going to talk about deep breathing or shallow positive thinking. We're going deep into the operating system of your mind. We're exploring cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, the single most powerful, scientifically proven tool to dismantle that reality distortion field. And pay attention, because there are 10 specific lies your brain tells you when you're anxious. And late burner 3 causes the most suffering. This is the blueprint to rewire your anxious brain. Welcome to Psych Blueprint. To understand how CBT works, we need to understand the fundamental mistake most of us make when dealing with anxiety. Imagine you're driving on the highway, and suddenly the check engine light comes on. Anxiety is like that warning light. It's uncomfortable, it's scary, but it's just a signal. In the old paradigm, we panic and focus entirely on shutting off the warning light. We distract ourselves, avoid the situation, or try to force ourselves to think happy thoughts to soothe the discomfort. This is like putting black tape over the check engine light and continuing to drive, pretending everything is fine. The actual engine problem is still there, and it's getting worse. The new paradigm, the foundation of CBT, is that we pull over, pop the hood, and check the engine. The engine in this case is your cognition, the way you think. The core of CBT rests on a revolutionary idea, simple yet profound. Events don't cause emotions. Your thoughts about events cause emotions. Consider the ABC model. A is the activating event. C is the emotional consequence. Most people live their lives believing A causes C. My boss wants to see me, A, so I'm anxious, C. I'm stuck in traffic, A, so I'm angry, C. But they're missing the most critical step in the middle. B, the belief or interpretation. My boss wants to see me, A. I believe this means I've done something terribly wrong and I'm about to be fired, B. Therefore I'm anxious, C. This is the game changer. This is your aha moment. If B leads to C, then we can change C by changing B. We can't always control what happens to us, A, but we have control over how we interpret it, B. This is how we dismantle the reality distortion field. And interestingly, this idea isn't new. The roots of CBT actually trace back to an ancient philosophy from 2,000 years ago, used by emperors and slaves alike to find inner peace. But before we explore that, we need to understand why our brains generate these distorted beliefs in the first place. Part A, Origin and Definition, the what. CBT sounds like a modern clinical term, but its roots go much deeper. It started on the streets of ancient Greece and Rome. The Stoic philosophers, like Epictetus, a former slave, said it nearly 2,000 years ago, men are not disturbed by things, but by the view which they take of them. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Our life is what our thoughts make it." Fast forward to the 1960s, psychiatrist Aaron Beck noticed that his depressed and anxious patients weren't thinking randomly. They were thinking in very specific, systematic, and flawed patterns. He called these automatic negative thoughts, or ANTZs. CBT is the fusion of this ancient wisdom with modern behavioral science. It focuses on the cognitive triangle. Your thoughts influence your feelings. Your feelings influence your behaviors. And your behaviors reinforce your thoughts. They form a self-perpetuating loop. CBT provides specific intervention points to break this loop. Part B, the mechanism, the how, the reality distortion. Field, why does our brain generate these ANTs? Why does it create the reality distortion field? One word, survival. Our brains did not evolve to make us happy. They evolved to keep us safe. In evolutionary history, the brain developed what's called a negativity bias. It would rather overreact than underreact. Better to mistake a stick for a snake, false alarm, than a snake for a stick, dead. In the modern world, this mechanism backfires. The amygdala, the brain's alarm center, is constantly scanning for threats. When it detects a potential threat, like an ambiguous email or silence in a conversation, it can hijack the prefrontal cortex, the rational, logical part of your brain. When this happens, our ability to think clearly is compromised. We fall into the reality distortion field Aaron Beck called these thinking errors cognitive distortions. These are the 10 lies your brain tells you. Let's explore the 3 most common and damaging. Types in are catastrophizing. This is when your brain takes a small issue and turns it into an apocalyptic disaster. You didn't just make a mistake in your presentation. Your career is over. Everyone is laughing at you, and you'll never recover. All or nothing thinking, black and white thinking. You see the world in absolute extremes with no gray areas. If you're not perfect, you're a total failure. If a relationship ends, you'll never find love again. Mind reading. This is the most painful lie I mentioned. You assume you know what other people are thinking about you, and you always assume it's the worst-case scenario. A colleague walks by without saying hello, and you immediately conclude, they hate me. What did I do wrong? When in reality, they might just be distracted thinking about their lunch. These distortions are the cracks in the lens through which you view the world. Part C, addressing skepticism and nuances, the caveats. Now, we need to clear up some common misconceptions about CBT. This is where many people get it wrong. Skepticism 1. It sounds like CBT is just the power of positive thinking? Absolutely not. This is the most crucial distinction. CBT is about accurate thinking, not positive thinking. The goal is to see the situation objectively, based on evidence. If you are genuinely in a bad situation, CBT doesn't ask you to pretend to be happy. It helps you cope effectively, rather than being paralyzed by catastrophizing. Positive thinking often ignores reality. CBT confronts reality. Skepticism, too. What if my worries are rational? Bad things can happen. Yes, they can. Sometimes the worst-case scenario does happen. CBT helps you distinguish between productive anxiety and unproductive anxiety. Productive anxiety motivates you to act, e.g., studying for an exam. Unproductive anxiety keeps you spinning in what-if scenarios and paralyzes you. CBT helps you focus on what you can control. Skepticism 3. Is CBT too rational? Does it ignore emotions? Not at all. CBT acknowledges emotions are real and important, but it teaches us that we can't solely rely on emotions to determine the truth. This is another cognitive distortion called emotional reasoning. Just because you feel worthless doesn't mean you are worthless. Feelings are data, but not absolute truth. Part D, impact and case study, the so what? The mental courtroom. Why is understanding this so critical? Because the consequences of living in the reality distortion field are massive. It erodes self-confidence, leads to avoidance, and ultimately shrinks your life. Living with unchecked cognitive distortions is like living in a courtroom where only one person is allowed to speak, the prosecutor. Let's go back to the story of Sarah and the email from her boss. We need to talk, the event or the ambiguous email. The consequence? C. Racing heart, sleepless night, panic, the belief. B. The prosecutor takes the stand. Voice-over aggressive dramatic, members of the emotional jury. This email is undeniable proof that Sarah is a failure. She has made a grave error and will certainly be fired tomorrow. The jury, Sarah's emotions, hears this and immediately panics. Case closed. Verdict: extreme anxiety and despair. This is how most of us operate our minds. We accept the first accusation from the prosecutor without cross-examination, without demanding evidence. But there's another way. We can call the defense attorney. We can start the CBT process. However, there's an important warning. Challenging your thoughts can backfire severely if you do it the wrong way, turning it into mental suppression. CBT is the process of training yourself to become the sharp defense attorney for your own mind. It is a learnable skill. Here's the 3-step blueprint to dismantle the reality distortion field. Step 1. Identify, catching the prosecutor. You can't change a thought you don't notice. The first step is developing meta-awareness, the ability to think about your thinking. The tool, the thought record. This is the gym for your mind. Whenever you feel your mood suddenly shift, e.g., from okay to extremely anxious, stop and ask, what exactly just went through my mind right before I felt this? Sarah pulls out her thought record situation. Received email. We need to talk. Emotion, anxiety, rate intensity, 90-100. Automatic negative thoughts, ANTs. I did something wrong. I'm getting fired. The crucial move, label the distortion. Sarah looks at the list of 10 distortions and identifies, this is catastrophizing and mind-reading. This act of labeling alone creates distance between Sarah and the thought. It's no longer an absolute truth, it's a hypothesis. Step 2. Challenge, cross-examining the prosecutor. This is the heart of CBT. It's time to put the prosecutor on the stand and demand evidence. This is where we must be careful. If you challenge too aggressively, stop being stupid for thinking that, you're not getting fired. You can trigger the brain's defense mechanisms. It becomes suppression or internal argument, which is ineffective. Instead, we use Socratic questioning with curiosity and objectivity, like a scientist examining a hypothesis. The defense attorney's core questions, the evidence check. What evidence supports this thought? The email is ambiguous. What evidence contradicts this thought? Recent reviews were good. Boss praised me last week. Company is hiring. The alternative check. Are there any other explanations for the event? Boss wants to discuss a new project. Boss was busy, so wrote a short email. The impact check. Is believing this thought helpful? No, it paralyzes me. If the worst-case scenario happens, could I cope? Yes, I have skills and experience. The perspective check. What would I tell a close friend if they were in this situation? By doing this, we are reactivating the prefrontal cortex and calming the amygdala. We are introducing logic into the emotional equation. Step 3. Reframe, the defense attorney's closing argument. After reviewing all the evidence objectively, the defense attorney delivers the closing argument, a new, balanced, realistic, and accurate thought. Sarah's old thought, ANT, I'm getting fired. Belief 90%, the new thought, reframe. My boss wants to talk. While the uncertainty makes me nervous based on my performance, it's more likely a routine discussion or about a new project. There is no solid evidence I'm getting fired. Either way, I can handle it. Rechecking emotions. Sarah re-rates her anxiety. It drops from 90 to 40. The difference is profound. She is still nervous, but no longer panicking. She has regained control. This is CBT in action. It's not magic. It's a method. And it's an iterative process. Every time you do this process, you are literally rewiring the neural pathways in your brain, weakening the old anxious connections, and strengthening the new realistic ones. The journey to mastering anxiety is not about eliminating it completely. Anxiety is a natural part of being human. This journey is about changing your relationship with it. We started this video by recognizing a staggering statistic: 97% of what we worry about is a reality distortion field. We learned that it's not the events that cause our emotions, but our beliefs about those events, and we explored the blueprint of CBT, the ABC model, the 10 cognitive distortions, and the 3-step process: Identify, challenge, and reframe. Remember the mental courtroom. For years, you might have let the aggressive prosecutor run the show, delivering unsubstantiated accusations and sending your emotional jury into a panic. But today, you've been given the tools to become the defense attorney for yourself. Every time you demand evidence, every time you seek alternatives, you are taking back control. You are shifting from the role of the victim of your thoughts to the architect of your mind. This path takes persistence, but the reward is invaluable: empowered clarity. Now I have a small challenge for you. Don't just watch this video and forget about it. Take that first step. In the next 24 hours, commit to catching one automatic negative thought. Write it down and just label it. This is a thought, not a fact. That is the beginning of change. If you found this video helpful and want to dive deeper into evidence-based strategies to master your psychology, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. At Psych Blueprint, we are committed to providing you with the best blueprints for building a more resilient and meaningful life. Thanks for watching. Keep building.